Hey everybody, I've been messing around with the new upgraded Enlightened crown, mostly trying to figure out how to integrate it into late game boss fights. I think I've got a good method for Fuelweaver, and I wanted to show you a few different versions of this fight that makes use of the extra damage from the crown with a gear loadout that complements it. Before we jump in, I will give you a rundown of the new crown powers and how to get the Celestial Jewels, and then we'll talk Fuelweaver. Major late game spoilers are incoming, so if you don't want to know how the lunar arc ends, now's the time to click away. Okay, these Celestial Jewels are a drop from the Celestial Scion, which is the final phase of the Warbot fight, and signals Wagstaff's, departure from the constant. Socketing these into an Enlightened crown will increase the amount of damage dealt by Gestalts, and when all 5 are socketed, the player is locked into full lunacy, meaning you can use the crown non-stop for Gestalt DPS without having to refill your sanity. And we're talking 51 damage per Gestalt with a fully upgraded crown, a quarter of which is planar damage. So it is a very strong addition to late game fights. Now let's look at a few different ways we can use the crown versus Fuelweaver. Normally it's tricky keeping your sanity up enough in this fight to consistently use it, but with an upgraded crown, sanity management is pretty much a no-brainer. I'm going to call this strategy up close and personal, because we are going to keep the boss right in the middle of the arena so that we can use the Brightshade staff to deal with all of the summons. Okay, for the first example, let's assume that you've done all the Lunar Rift stuff, but you haven't yet fought Fuelweaver. So we're going to utilize some Brightshade gear plus 2 Thulecite suits, which offer good damage reduction and durability. We're going to be tanking the boss for most of the fight, so we also want a bit of healing. Now you can use marble suits or knight armor, but they have low durability, so I consider them a more expensive option here because you're going to need more than 2 armor pieces if you're going to tank the whole time. So you see, I was doing a little bit of kiting in the first phase because half the time Fuelweaver does the bone snare attack, or it doesn't do the snare attack. So if you can kite, you can. There's no reason not to. But if he snares you, you just start tanking him. Now here comes the second phase. He's going to throw down a cage. He's going to throw up the shield. We're going to switch to the Brightshade helm. We happen to be conveniently at low sanity. So switching to the helm immediately puts us in insanity. And equipping the helm, the crown puts us back to full lunacy. And we're snared again, so we're going to tank, occasionally switching between the staff and the sword, just so that we keep projectiles flying around and keep all of the woven shadows away from Fuelweaver. And then when he throws up the shield again, we just put back on the helmet, we equip the staff, let the projectiles fly. When the mind control comes, we equip the crown again. Easy, that's pretty much the fight. Now, I didn't want to use Volt Go Jelly for this fight, but I did want to showcase one special Warley perk here, and that is Grim Galette. If you eat one while wearing the crown, your health is completely restored because you're always at full sanity. It has suddenly become an incredibly powerful dish for any character using the crown. And obviously, especially good for Warley because Warley doesn't have a lot of good repeat dish health options. But I don't believe Grim Galette is affected by the repeat dish penalty. But yeah, that's pretty much how you tank Fuelweaver with the new Enlightened crown. As you see, it costs us a little more than 1 Thulecite suit and a couple of Brightshade repair kits. That's it. Now, for the next version of this fight, we are going to assume that you've killed Fuelweaver once and are killing it again in order to reset the ruins. This time we're going to use Brightshade armor and drop a Thurble in the middle. So as long as we stay close to the Thurble, we can kite Fuelweaver around for the entire fight and not worry about getting snared. So there's still no lazy explorers needed with this strategy. The only difference is we're kiting for the entirety of the fight and we're staying as close to the center of the arena as possible. So you see, we're still doing good damage. We're dealing 74 damage with the Brightshade sword even without the helm, and the damage from the Gestalts adds an extra 51 onto each attack. And as long as you keep any enemy stationary, pretty much all of the Gestalts are going to land their attacks. We're in phase 2, we're going to switch to the helm. He does the mind control immediately, and you see that you really don't have to switch out of insanity for very long to cancel the mind control. I equipped the Enlightened crown for like half a second, and that canceled mind control. So even if there's projectiles still flying around, if you do it fast enough, then the projectiles, and you go back to insanity quickly, Sometimes the projectiles can find the unseen hands again and fly back to it. But you see, it's pretty much the same idea. We're killing this shield as quickly as we can by bouncing all the attacks off of Fuelweaver. And that's why keeping the boss in the center of the arena is important, so that we'll always be in range of all of the summons by bouncing off of the boss. You'll notice he tried to do a cage right there, but because of our proximity to the Thurble, the attack failed. It can still damage you, but it won't spawn the cage. Switching very quickly to the crown to cancel the mind control. And you see, we do the same thing when the woven shadows are up, where we alternate between hitting the boss with the bright shade sword, backing off, and throwing a couple of projectiles at it, just to keep all of the woven shadows away. But surprisingly, this version of the fight is even cheaper than the version before you get the Thurble, because you are not spending any the only cost to your armor durability is if you actually get hit, but you can do this fight completely hitless easily. And it ends up costing you 2 repair kits, one for your weapon and one for your bright shade staff. But yeah, this is definitely one of the cheapest versions of the fight that I've ever encountered. Thank you. Thank you, Celestial Jewels. And for the final version of this fight, I'm going to kill Fuelweaver with an ordinary Beefalo. This is pretty much identical to the previous version, except it's actually a bit cheaper, because we do not lose any durability on our main weapon, which is the Beefalo head. It should also probably be mentioned that unless you're using food buffs on the Beefalo or playing as Wendy with Abigail buffing a Beefalo, instead of a war saddle, you probably want to use a nightmare saddle, which does, I believe, the same amount of damage versus Fuelweaver, but it also provides some extra protection for the Beefalo and some extra speed. And you've probably already noticed that not only are we doing less damage than we were with the Bright Shade Sword, but we're also hitting less frequently, even though I'm using animation canceling. You're always going to be able to hit faster and harder on foot. The next time someone tells you that Beefalo are OP, they're really not the strongest option in the game. But they do provide a degree of safety, which is definitely appreciated in fights like this, where, you know, you're not able to make too many big mistakes. Mind control, equip the crown just for a second, and you see the projectiles bouncing around. They just went back to their targets. But yeah, the fight progresses like usual, and I would not recommend going that far away, because the radius of the Thurble, I want to say it's like 2 tiles. It's not super long, so if you get out of that range, you run the risk of getting snared. It amazes me how, after all of these years of content updates, the Fuelweaver fight still remains, for me, the best boss fight in the game. And not just because of the way it was initially implemented, but the way in which future content has interacted with the fight. When all the Rift stuff came out, we got Bright Shade gear, and we got all these new strategies for dealing with Fuelweaver. Now we've got the Enlightened Crown, we got these new strategies. Every new skill tree basically introduced a unique approach to fighting this boss. There's so many choices for how to approach this fight now, and it's something that I don't find with a lot of other boss fights in this game, and it's always impressed me, and it's always a joy coming back to this boss and figuring out new ways to approach it. Cheaper ways, easier ways, faster ways. It's something that I'm always looking forward to jumping back into. So yeah, as you can see, the crown opens up a lot of potential for finishing these fights faster with pretty much any character. And most importantly, it reduces the cost of these repeat fights significantly, which to me is one of the biggest late game benefits that you can find. Anyways, that's it for these fights. I hope you found the video useful, and I'll see you next time.